Please, let's get a divorce.
My husband suddenly said that. I stopped doing my chores and my husband gave a sneaky grin.
I'm taking over my mistress's company, so you're no longer needed.
I nodded at my husband who said that, as if to rub salt in the wound. Fine, here's the divorce papers. Finally, I can be free from this husband. My name is Catherine, a 45-year-old office worker. We don't have any kids. My husband's name is Frank, and we both work as office workers, though at different companies. So we only see each other in the morning and at night. The daily frustration is that my husband does not help with housework at all. No matter how many times I ask him to help, he says he hasn't done it before and pushes all the troubles onto me. If that's all, it's fine, but it's infuriating that he gets sarcastic every time I do something. I have been devoted to my husband since our marriage, but his irrelevant attitude had recently turned me completely cold towards him. But I don't think about divorcing him. There's no reason big enough to make me want to divorce him. It sounds bad to call it as a habit, but my husband and I have been living like this for over 10 years. But there was a change for us. That is, my husband's attitude has been prickly recently. I was sick of his increased sarcasm, and I would find out the reason as to why my husband had changed that way in a few days. I went to work as usual that day. I had something to do at work, and I was going to leave the house earlier than usual. When I told my husband about it, he sneered and was being sarcastic.
You're so inefficient. Are you really able to work?
My husband laughed down at me with a snort. I held back my irritation in the morning and spoke out a little roughly, "I'm leaving," and my husband sent me off without a reply. During lunch break, I was having lunch with my female colleagues who were friendly, and the rumor in the company came up. "Did you know the CEO's daughter might finally get married?" I think I was responding indifferently to my colleagues, who were all being excited. The CEO's daughter is a young woman named Elizabeth, who's 35 years old. She is said to be the successor, but she hasn't achieved noticeable results, so the executives don't seem to think well of her. Her father is also trying to arrange a marriage for her. "Her boyfriend is suspicious. He might have a wife and children." I was surprised at those words. Everyone else was also saying, "Huh?" and opening their eyes wide. "Well, it seems that Elizabeth herself denies it, so it might be a lie." My colleagues laughed loudly as they said that, but I thought there was a possibility that such rumors would come out. In the evening, it was time to go home, so I headed out. I have to prepare dinner before my husband comes home or he will complain. And while I was heading home, I usually take the train to work, but I found my husband on the platform at the station. I was surprised to see him going home early, and as I walked towards him, a young woman ran up to him before me. I was surprised and completely froze there. And what's more surprising was that the woman was the rumored Elizabeth. I didn't understand why Elizabeth was snuggling up to him as if she was his lover. With a sense of disbelief in front of me, I secretly followed the two. As I followed, I realized the two were heading for a fancy restaurant. It was a restaurant where many couples would go for their dates, and I felt very dizzy. I took a deep breath and captured the two entering the restaurant in a photo on my mobile phone. And while I was standing there in a daze, I got a message from my husband.
I'm going to have dinner with someone from the company today, so I don't need dinner.
My husband was lying to me to have dinner with that woman. If he has nothing to hide, there should be no reason for him to lie to me. From this day on, I started suspecting my husband of infidelity. A few days after that, even though it was a holiday, my husband was quickly getting ready from early in the morning. I usually don't ask, but today I asked him, "Where are you going?"
I'm going to play golf with a colleague from the company.
My husband's eyes were swimming as he said that, and I knew immediately that it was a lie. I didn't expect my husband to be so obviously disturbed. I wonder why I didn't notice it until now. Does that mean I had no interest in my husband? That makes me feel somewhat empty. My husband left the house quickly as if to run away from me. I can't just wait for my husband to come home. Just as dinner was about to be ready, I got a message from my husband.
I'll be home late tonight, so eat dinner without me.
Upon reading the message, I let out a deep sigh. My husband was probably going to have dinner with his mistress again. I was beyond furious, but I simply replied to my husband saying, Understood. I didn't want to provoke suspicion by confronting him unnecessarily. I decided to maintain my usual calm self and carry on with life as if it was normal. Later that night, when my husband came home, he was grinning suspiciously. "Did you have fun today?"
I heard some interesting news, but it's none of your business.
My husband cheerfully handed me all his belongings. When I accepted his stuff, he headed to the bath with just his phone. "Should I hold your phone too?" I offered, but my husband refused.
I have to check my emails, even on my days off. Unlike you, I have responsibilities at work.
I could hear his voice from the bathroom, and I thought he was lying. It's unlikely he'd be dealing with work matters on his personal phone. He probably just wanted to keep in touch with his mistress, without me disturbing him. I felt my feelings for my husband cooling down more than ever. A month went on like this. My husband continued to meet with his mistress, and I had collected substantial evidence. I only had to confront him now, but I didn't know when would be the right time. Then one day, my husband suddenly said,
I'm quitting my job.
"What?" This was the first time I heard about this, and I was a little taken aback. He couldn't possibly be quitting his job without discussing it with me. When I asked if he would start working soon, my husband looked at me with a displeased look.
I'm not like you. I'm competent. I'm only quitting because I was headhunted. And don't think that just because I'll be earning more, our lifestyle will improve. It won't.
My husband smirked and started looking at his phone. It was clear that he was up to something, but I simply replied, "I see. When are you quitting?"
I've already submitted my resignation. Starting from tomorrow, I'll be joining a new company.
Saying so, Frank headed towards his new company the next day. Since changing jobs, he seemed strangely cheerful. I tried asking him several times about his new company, but he wouldn't answer.
Stop nagging. Like you, I'm tired. Be more considerate.
He tries to keep me away from him by saying such things like that. Feeling curious, I secretly checked his documents, only to discover that he had joined the same company as me. I was truly shocked and considered confronting him, but I held myself back. This could be useful. The next day, Frank, who usually left home early in the morning, came home at noon, which was very rare of him to do. Before I could welcome him, he hastily approached me.
I beg you, please, divorce me.
Upon hearing his words, I stopped doing my housework and he grinned widely. When I asked what had suddenly come up, he seemed to be delighted, perhaps thinking I was rattled.
I'm taking over my mistress's company, so I don't need you anymore.
I was taken aback at the thought of Frank becoming a CEO. I held my breath in surprise. Frank, with a smug look on his face, started bragging.
Actually, I met a young woman at a bar, and while we were dating, she fell for me. So she introduced me to her father, who happened to be the CEO of a renowned company.
What?
Her father seemed to like me and offered to let me take over his company. I couldn't miss such an opportunity, could I?
He was gleaming with excitement and spoke in a buoyant tone as if he was narrating a dream. I was infuriated by his lack of remorse, but he didn't care about my feelings and just kept grinning.
Tomorrow, the CEO is going to introduce me to everyone at the meeting as the new CEO. I feel so relieved to finally be able to break up with a woman like you who's only aging away. Just so you know, I won't accept a refusal to divorce. If that happens, I'll hire a lawyer and sue you.
I was shocked that he, the one who cheated, had the audacity to sue me. I was utterly disgusted with my husband's self-centeredness. But this might be a good opportunity, I thought, holding back a smile, determined not to let this chance slip away. Sure, here are the divorce papers. Saying that, I took the divorce papers out of the drawer. My name was already filled in. At my unexpected preparedness, my husband was taken aback.
Why the hell did you prepare this? Are you really okay with this?
My flustered husband was demanding answers. Even though he was the one who brought it up, I wondered why he was so agitated. Did you really think I wouldn't notice anything about your affair? After I tossed a few photos on top of the divorce papers, Frank made a face as if he couldn't believe it. While he was out with his mistress, I had contacted a detective agency to gather evidence. I have all the evidence. You can do as you please about becoming the CEO, but I'll be sure to get division of property. When I said that, he stood there, with his mouth open. However, soon enough he began to smirk as usual.
Oh, really? If you knew, it saves us more time. I can afford to pay alimony. After all, I'm going to be the CEO.
Seeing his smug smile, I thought that him being able to laugh like that would only last for a little bit. I was thinking of executing my plan with this conversation as a starting point. I wouldn't simply accept division of property and let it end at that. Stress that had accumulated for over 10 years could not be relieved with such a matter. Becoming the CEO means that you won't need this house, right?
Of course. I'm being taken in as a son-in-law into a mansion. I'll be able to enjoy the luxury that you could never taste even in your whole life.
Then I'll sell this house, okay? When I said that coldly, he answered,
Yeah, in an uninterested way. Even though I'm going to be a CEO and live happily with a young wife, you may get division of property, but you're destined to live alone. How pathetic. Don't bother trying to find a partner, okay? An old woman like you won't be anyone's choice. It'll only make you a laughingstock. Well, have a good life.
His irritating remarks were no longer painful or annoying to me. Don't think that this will end easily like that. After I said that, Frank, mistaking it as words of frustration, laughed out loud while holding his stomach. That day I packed up and moved out by the evening. He also packed his car and headed off to his mistress's place in a hurry. The remaining furniture and house were already sold. With the money from the sales, I headed to the apartment I had previously had my eye on. A few days later, I attended an important executive meeting where the CEO was to decide his successor. While setting up the equipment, I called out to my senior colleagues. Apparently, they were discussing whose computer they were going to use. Please, use mine, I suggested, bringing out my own laptop. I'm the one who prepared today's documents, so everything is organized. With this, my preparations were complete. All that remained was for the CEO and the executives to gather. An hour later, the CEO and executives took their seats. I waited, ready to operate the computer as the meeting progressed.
As I mentioned earlier, I've brought our successor candidate with me today. I believe you all know him, but let me reintroduce him.
As the CEO finished his sentence, my husband walked in, wearing a wide smile. Next to him, Elizabeth was also smiling elegantly. My husband strolled in, a confident grin on his face. However, the moment he noticed me operating the computer, he blurted out a startled, "Huh?" "What's wrong?" Elizabeth asked him, to which my husband quickly recovered and brushed it off with a,
"It's nothing. Could you display his information, please?"
Smiling to myself, I followed his instruction and projected onto the screen the incriminating evidence of my husband's infidelity. This was my plan. Even if my thick-headed husband paid division of property, he wouldn't reflect back to his own actions and what he had done. That's why I wanted to expose my husband's ugliness in front of a lot of people and have him reflect back to his own actions even if he didn't want to. The atmosphere in the conference room instantly changed. Both my husband and the CEO were stunned, their faces turning red as they stared at the screen. "Is something wrong? This is his information. I think it might be faster if you look at this. Oh, by the way, I'm his ex-wife." I was quite surprised when he suddenly mentioned about divorce yesterday. He was so excited about becoming the CEO. As I spoke nonchalantly, my ex-husband frantically approached me, raising his hand towards me. I braced myself for the impact, clenching my teeth and refusing to avert my eyes. But his hand was quickly restrained by a security officer.
"Explain what is going on,"
the CEO demanded in a low voice. My husband, restrained by the security officer nearby, turned pale as he stared at the CEO.
"Don't say anything unnecessary,"
my ex-husband warns me as he glared at me. I smiled back at him and argued back. "Unnecessary? Like how you cheated on me with Elizabeth?" Upon hearing this, my husband's face turned even more pale. The CEO, Elizabeth, and all the executives who were present there held their breath, looking at my husband.
"That's not true. She's just trying to sabotage the meeting."
Seeing my husband struggle to turn off the computer, I quickly switched the screen, displaying a photo of him at the train station acting intimately with Elizabeth. After seeing this, I started to investigate about my ex-husband and found out he was cheating. I've put up with his sarcastic comments for over 10 years, but his affair was the last straw for me. As I explained, Elizabeth looked agitated and glared at my husband. "You told me you were single." It seemed that she didn't know. Frank was scolded by the CEO, saying,
"What the hell is this?"
and he shrank back in fear. "When did you start seeing each other?" "A year ago. I met him at a pub I was taken to by a friend. I had no idea he had a wife he'd been with for over 10 years. I couldn't believe my ears when I heard what Elizabeth had said. When I glared at Frank, he became awkward and his eyes swam. Then the CEO began to approach him.
"Good thing I found out before I declared you as my successor. You know what's going to happen now, don't you?" "Wait a minute, you can't mean—" "I can't have a man who lied about being single and deceived my daughter as the CEO."
The CEO's angry voice echoed throughout the conference room. Hearing those words, Frank collapsed powerlessly to his knees. I felt sorry for Elizabeth, who was standing stunned in silence near a guy like Frank.
"I can't believe you were that kind of person. Let's discuss the engagement in a proper place. Don't you dare think that you can stay in this company after doing this."
The CEO said that and instructed Frank and Elizabeth to leave. He tried to say something, but the CEO glared at him and turned pale again. So he stumbled out of the conference room. I felt refreshed watching him being in that kind of state.
"Don't think you can get away with this too, all right?"
The CEO said that, looking bitter at me. He must have had mixed feelings about me humiliating him about his family to the public. I do feel sorry for causing such a fuss in an important meeting. However, I didn't want to let Frank off the hook. I truly apologize for causing such an inconvenience in an important meeting. I intend to take responsibility for causing this disturbance and resign from the company. When I said that, the CEO nodded and gestured for me to leave. I left the conference room as instructed. I loved this job, but since I got to get my revenge, I have no regrets. As I left the company, Frank, with his pale face, pushed past the security and ran towards me.
"Don't think you can get away with this."
"Shouldn't you be more worried about losing your job and your house?" When I said that, he let out a pathetic,
"Ugh."
Yes, I sold off his house. Due to this incident, he has made the CEO angry, and he will probably be kicked out of the mansion after the engagement is broken off. Understanding that, Frank quickly changed his attitude and clung to me.
Please, I have no savings. I can't afford to rent a house. Please help me."
"Why don't you have any savings?"
Because I was going to be the CEO. I had a huge celebration. I wouldn't have been dumped like this if you hadn't done this. You better take responsibility for this."
"What are you talking about? The one who should take responsibility is you, isn't it?" As I coldly replied back, he was led away by the security guard, holding back tears. Now, I have nothing left to do. I felt refreshed thinking that I was finally free from a guy like Frank. Later, I quit the job and started looking for a new job. As for Frank, he was kicked out of the mansion because the engagement with Elizabeth was broken off, and he was told by the CEO to quit the company. There was constant gossip in the company, and it was said that Frank left the company while everyone gave him the cold shoulder. I heard that Frank had to settle in a small apartment. He had to pay Elizabeth and I compensation for the damages caused, and his life was said to be a struggle. Recently, I heard that he is struggling with debt. I live a short distance away from my previous workplace. Luckily, I found a new job, so I'm not having any trouble making a living. Because of the incident, I had to distance myself from my kind colleagues, but I still have no regrets on what I did. Now I'm enjoying a stress-free life while working hard at my new job.